hello VRS staff. This is Kim Babine. I'm Director of Community Partnerships, and I am here to talk a little bit about some funding changes that are necessary as we move from grants to PT contracts for pre-ed services and benefit services. The PowerPoint that you see on the recording will also be available to flip through, and this information is consistent with emails and other information we've sent out. And it's not the last you'll hear on these topics. So this is just kind of a quick and dirty, get you the information that's needed right now, and more information will be coming on both topics, both pre-eds and benefits coaching. So stay tuned and be in touch if you have questions, if this doesn't answer your questions, and we will include that in future trainings. So the reason we are doing this is that VRS was told by our federal funder, the Rehabilitation Services Administration, that the way we were funding services for 2 activities was not okay, and we needed to change. So those 2 activities were benefits coaching provided through the VRIL collaboration grants to the 8 centers for independent living, and the pre-ed services, the way that we had been getting those services before was through grants for pre-ed services to the Title I partners, 180 Degrees, ProAct, and Goodwill. Those had been grants that were set up. It was an RFP that went out for any organizations to apply, and those were the ones that were awarded grants. And what the Rehab Services Administration told us is that we are not allowed to grant vocational rehabilitation funds out. And so we needed to change how we purchase the services moving forward. And we just found this information out a few months ago and have been working as diligently and quickly as possible to change how we get these services, because we wanted to make sure that these services were available moving forward and that they were available to the individuals that we serve. So we are, we've been moving more quickly than we would have liked to, and would have liked in some of these cases to be able to have more conversations with you, more conversations with community partners, but we needed to get things done because the grants are ending on the September 30th, so next Monday, and we needed to have a funding structure set up for October 1st and moving forward. So that's why things have come together really quickly, and we're communicating this information out to community partners as well. But if anyone ever has, if you get questions from community partners, feel free to send them my way, and we will work through those issues with them. So the first the first set of services we want to talk through are benefit services. So again, the Centers for Independent Living have been providing these services, benefits coaching, to individuals we serve through the VRIL collaboration grants. And we still want to use the centers to provide benefits coaching, but we need to do so through the PT contracts. So we are currently in the process of adding benefits coaching to each center's PT contract. And after October 1, you will begin authorizing for benefit services as opposed to simply referring to a center. So some of you, especially in the Metro, have someone from the Metro Center for Independent Living co-located with you, and you kind of just, I understand you just kind of refer them over and they work with that center staff. Others in Greater Minnesota have people who come maybe one time a week, or maybe you just talk on the phone and through email, but now that will need to be set up through an authorization. Now there are a few different options to look for when you are looking to authorize for benefit services. And the way we've structured this, and again, it's not, this isn't set in stone. This is what we came up with in working with some VR staff and with Center for Independent Living staff and some of the leadership here to structure these services. And so we're going to try them and see how they work and be in touch with you about how they're working out. So one is the benefits coaching services. So this is the benefits coaching that the SILs have been providing to date, and it features the benefit report developed by the coach. So it's that DB 101 session, and it's the work before and after that benefit report that is really the emphasis here. And then there's also what we're now calling benefits planning services, and this is a full-blown benefits and work incentives analysis, or BS&A, by a certified work incentive coordinator, or CWIC, and this can be authorized on a per analysis basis or a flat fee. So this is the service that a couple community partners already have on their contracts, like Goodwill Easter Seals and YesWorks and Rise have this on there. And so we will now have a few centers who have CWICs on staff who will be able to do the full BS&A. Now, the benefits coaching services are basically what you've been using through the VRIL collaboration to date, and we are saying that it has to be completed by a staff who has completed a VRS approved training. So current SIL staff have been through the DHS benefits coaching training, and that is sufficient. If other providers come on board down the line, they'll have to let us know what training or competency that the staff have on those issues. The benefits planning services, the full BS&A, has to be completed by a CWIC. So that is something that will be monitoring from the admin level, especially before we put something on someone's contract, and then will be something that you'll just want to ensure, staff that you're referring to, you'll get to know the staff at the agencies, and we'll try and keep a handle on that as well. So we put together a definition for benefits coaching services. So the service type in Workforce 1 will be benefit counseling and analysis, and the service title is that benefits coaching services. And we pulled this information, this first part of the definition, from the PBA definition. So for the performance-based agreement for job placement and retention, we are doing a milestone structure. We're trying a milestone structure for the benefits coaching services. And so some of this is basically some of the similar language. So this might change as we dig into it a little bit more. But it says that the benefits coaching services is on a milestone structure, and it's intended for individuals who require assistance to understand how their benefits work in order to help them with their career planning. Then it goes into some of the payment information as well. Payments will be provided after the key milestones are reached, and the milestone will be pre-authorized by VRS staff, so you'll authorize for all 3 milestones at the beginning, just like you do for a job placement and retention PBA, and will be paid for once the community partner provides the information necessary to, the report and things that are necessary to be able to show that the milestone's been met. So this is milestone 1, and this is, milestone 1 is a $300 payment, and this is really laying the groundwork for the benefits report. So we worked with a couple of the centers who do some really great work in benefits coaching to help us understand what it is they do each step of the way when they're working with someone through the VRIL collaboration. And so they really took us step by step. And so if this doesn't track with how you work with, how you expect individuals to be worked with, let us know and we can tweak this. But it really is getting the information, doing that BPQI from Social Security, and they're setting people up in DB 101 in My Vault. They're doing the benefits lookup. They're in touch with the consumer. They're preparing for that initial benefits coaching meeting, having that initial benefits coaching meeting with the consumer, doing additional research, completing the activities, and being in touch with the hub as needed for technical assistance. Now, to be clear, the initial benefits coaching meeting with the consumer, in the next milestone, there's another meeting. You should be very clear, and we're clear with the providers as well, that if counselors want to be in those meetings, that you should be made aware of those meetings so that you can participate. Also, these meetings can take place by phone or Skype or Zoom or whatever you're using. They do not have to be in person. We know that's especially important in Greater Minnesota. Milestone 2. So milestone 2 is basically the benefit report, completion of the benefit report, and the planning meeting with the consumer. So it is the one that has the most tangible completion. So that's milestone 2, and that's $350. And then milestone 3 is we learn that there's a good amount of work that is after the benefits report is delivered. So that's milestone 3, and this is a $300 payment. So that's following up with the consumer, maybe helping them solving issues related to benefits, checking in with them about completion of next steps, and updating the benefit report to reflect changes to earnings or benefits. Follow-up meetings with the consumer as needed, scheduling wrap-up meetings, and a wrap-up meeting with the consumer. Now, the other service that you can authorize for is the deeper dive, which is the benefits planning service. And the service title is the service type is still benefits counseling and analysis, and the service title is benefits planning services. And instead of a PBA, this is going to continue to be authorized on a flat fee basis. So the bulk of it is the in-depth benefits and work incentives analysis, the BS&A. But it's also assisting the individual with putting work incentives in place, providing direction on how to report their earnings, and providing referrals for employment and other services. So this service will be on a couple of the contracts with the Centers for Independent Living, with MSIL and SEMSIL are adding it. And this is also what is currently on contract with Goodwill Easter Seals, Work Incentive Connection, or YesWorks, or RISE. There's a couple others that I'm not remembering right now, but for comparison's sake. Now, you may be wondering how to determine which services is most appropriate for the individual that you're working with. And we don't have all the answers to that yet. We're going to work on training to help you navigate this. To start out, you'll most often use the benefits coaching services, we think. The benefits planning services will be used more infrequently and only when that deep dive is needed. So what we envision is that most individuals that you work with will probably just start out with the benefits coaching services, that DB 101 work and that benefits report, and that may be enough for most people. And then if someone really needs that deeper dive, then you can look for that full BS&A with a CWIC level service. I don't have it linked here because I didn't have it posted yet, but we have a sample benefit report for you to look at, so then you can take a look at that and see if that's the level of information that will be helpful for the person that you're working with. And just know that, again, we are going to help you through that and have more conversations about which one to authorize for. This is just someone asked the question about, how does this work with Goodwill Work Incentives Connection? Like, how are they paid, and how does it interact with that? So this is just kind of restating in a different way that with the Benefits Coaching Services PBA, all the CILs are adding Benefits Coaching Services PBA to their contract. Goodwill Easter Seals and the other community providers will not have the Benefits Coaching PBA on their contract right away. We just wanted to get it on the SILS contract and then open it, try it out for a little bit, see if it's the right structure, and then we'll let all the other providers put it on their contract if they want. And so that will be in the future. For the benefits planning services, the BSNA, some of the SILs, two of the SILs, MSIL and SEMSIL, are adding the benefits planning services, that full-blown BSNA, to their contract. Not all of them. Goodwill, for comparison's sake, Goodwill Easter Seals has a BSA on their contract at $850. I think both MSIL and SEMSIL are putting theirs on at $850 as well. For those SILs that are adding it to their contract, the fee will be similar, but may not be the same. So again, I think it's around $850. Some other questions that have come up, and I know this is not a complete list. We've got time to meet with some of the metro offices. I already have meetings set up to discuss this. And if other teams and offices have questions, I'm happy to call in or visit if I can. And again, just know that there's more to come. So one of the questions was, what is the vendor required to submit for payment with their invoice? At this point, the regular report and invoice is what is required. We are looking at seeing if there's other sample reports that we want to put out like we do for the regular PBA, job placement and retention PBA, but we don't have those developed right now. So the regular report, which requires the summary information, will be what's required. The other question was, can I authorize for an intake for these services? And right now, if it's on the PT contract for the vendor, use your judgment, and we'll roll out a best practice with the services training when we go into more depth on the services. There's some questions we don't have yet answered there, so that's a to be determined. The VRS staff may also authorize for IL services at the same time as authorizing for the benefits coaching services. What we learned from as we kind of worked through this is we know that when the SILs are meeting with an individual, they're not only providing the activities that we now have structured under the PBA, the milestone setup, but we know they're also doing other services, providing other information tangential to benefits, like assistance with securing housing, transportation, applying for benefits, things like that. And those didn't strictly fall under benefits coaching. And so we decided those fall under IL services, and that when you're authorizing for the benefits coaching, you can also add that IL services so that at an hourly rate so that it picks up and we can pay for those services in that way. It made sense to kind of separate them because not everyone will need that. Let us know how that goes, and if it's not working, then we can adjust. The SILs currently have access to Workforce One through the grants and will continue to have access. So if you authorize to the SILs, you will still add the vendor to the case in Workforce One, and they'll continue to enter case notes as they were doing before, even though not all CRPs, most CRPs and LUVs do not do this at this time. We want to be able to allow them to continue like they were under the grant, and there's been some conversation about whether it makes sense to figure out a way for all our vendors to enter things so there's not as much paperwork and things being emailed back and forth. So we're using this as a pilot, so keep that in mind as well. If an individual is currently receiving benefits coaching from a SIL under the VRL collaboration grant and benefits coaching is on the plan, you should be able to make a system-driven amendment to the plan to facilitate the authorization. Had this conversation with the Anoka team, and it seemed like that would work. If it doesn't work and that's not quite right, let me know and I can share the information out with the whole group. For consumers who are currently receiving services, know that there are a number of consumers who are currently working with the centers to receive benefits coaching through the grants, and we want them to be able to finish out their service. So we are asking if you would please work with your RAM and the Center for Independent Living that you work with to identify who those people are and make a plan for those that need services through after 10/1 and moving forward. We anticipate that you will authorize so those individuals can complete the service or keep working. And obviously you can't authorize until the PT contracts amendments are executed, but you can make a plan for processing those authorizations once the contracts are in place. The SILs may be reaching out to you to set up a meeting to facilitate this. I know MSIL already has done so with a number of the metro locations and may continue to do that. One thing we wanted to be clear about, just as we created new service types and titles for benefits coaching and benefits planning, we wanted to be really clear on the pre-EPS definitions because there was benefits analysis on there. And so we wanted to just change the title slightly to benefits information services so that it's clear that those are different under the titles. So the service type for under pre-EPS is pre-EPS workplace readiness training, and the title is benefits information services. And you can authorize for this at the standard pre-EPS, individual, or group rates, and the travel differential as well. And the definition doesn't change from what it was on the pre-EPS definitions. Assist a student to understand how their benefits work in order to help them with their career planning. What we did add for clarification is that this is a high-level overview and is general in nature, and it can be provided as an individual service or in groups. All right, so just with the service types and titles, know that Workforce One and the service types and titles list form is being updated accordingly. Sherry's going to update those on September 30th, so they're ready to go 10/1. And we're also updating the definitions for PT contracts handout, the pre-EPS definitions for PT contracts handout, and the external web. We haven't gotten that back from communications yet, but we'll let you know as soon as we do. So pre-EPS is the other set of services that we're talking about that have changed from grants to contracts. And again, we're no longer granting funds to the Title I partners, 180 Degrees, ProAct, and Goodwill for the services. And all those partners are developing contracts to provide the services, as well as about 40 other CRPs, LUVs, and the SILs will have pre-EPS on their PT contracts in the next couple weeks. So we were hoping to have those all done by 10/1, and as always, hit a few bumps in the road, but those are in process right now. And we should have the Title I and SIL amendments done maybe the second or third, right after the first, and then the other 40 will come in the next week or two. So VRS will refer and authorize for those services like any other service on the PT contract instead of just working with those providers, those grantees. Again, same thing with the SILs. There are students who are currently working with the grantees, maybe currently working with the grantees who are currently in a service and like work-based learning and will need to continue that after October 1. So and we want them to be able to finish their work-based learning experience or whatever they're working on. So will you please identify, work with your RAM and the pre-EPS grantee that you're working with to identify if there are any students and to make a plan for those that will need services to continue. And then you'll make a plan to authorize for those individuals. Again, we'll let you know as soon as those PT contracts are executed. Same thing as the SILs. The partners already have access to Workforce One, the ones who had a pre-EPS grant, and so we're going to let them continue to have access. And so if you authorize to those vendors for pre-EPS, you'll still add the vendor to the case in Workforce One. And case notes serve as their invoicing report, so not an email. So they won't email the report along with the invoice. It will be with the within case notes. All right, this is a repeat of some information that was shared at the transition and pre-ETS meetings by Alyssa Klein and Ann Macklett and me and Chris and Jan and Jennifer and the whole crew. So feel free to fast forward through these. So after October 1, please only purchase pre-ETS services through vendors that have pre-ETS on their PT contract, and only authorize for those pre-ETS services. Don't use EDS and PBAs and kind of the other workarounds that we've been using. Now, I know we wanted to have all the contracts out by 10/1, and that's not going to happen. So if that's a problem, if you really need to authorize for things and you're waiting on a contract, just let me know, and we can figure out a solution. So these next slides I wanted to include just so you could see, for those who maybe weren't at the transition meetings, and then also you can see what we're providing to community partners is in terms of training. So this is the referral form information, and so I'm not going to go through the content. I just wanted you to have it in the slides so we could be consistent. So I've got the 2 referral forms. This we're letting community partners know that this is the information that we're collecting and that they're used to getting more information for eligible students, but when it's a potentially eligible student, this is the extent of the demographic data that they'll be getting. We are going to go through specific information in terms of how the invitation to placement works, how they receive the referral, and complete the placement plan. So they'll get the same information that you all have been trained on. We're going to be really clear with them about needing an authorization for payment in place before with VRS before they provide services, that will have consistent standardized rates statewide, and just so you know, the pre-ETS services, as always, are listed in their contract and will also be available through the lookup by region. Now, how we authorize for group services is new for everybody. We haven't done that in a while with VRS services, and so we'll be really interested to see how this is working out. So you will authorize per student, you authorize on an individual basis, and so you'll authorize for the highest amount possible, which is the $75 per hour individual rate, and then send off the student, and once they have the class, once they have the group, what the vendor will do when they report an invoice for that student, they will say there were 5 students who attended, and so you will have already authorized for the $75 per person rate, and what you'll do is adjust the authorization and pay accordingly based on the number of people who actually showed up, the students who showed up, those 5. Even if they were expecting 7, we'll pay on the 5. Again, we can't pay for students who were referred but didn't attend. And if you have questions on this, be sure to let us know. We'll be clear with the community partners is they have to keep a class list which documents which students attended, and sometimes the community partner we anticipate will be holding a class and will send, they'll have 5 students from VRS in the class, but the school will be like, hey, mind if we send a couple more who aren't VRS or potentially eligible? And the community partner may say yes, and that's up to them, but we can't pay based on the total number. So if we send that there are 5 students in the class who have VRS, they're with VRS potentially eligible, then, and 2 other students show up, so there's a total of 7, we only pay for those 5. So we'll be clear with the community provider about this. The next 3 slides are the rate structure, and we're getting a document together that will be prettier than this, so you can actually read it all, but just wanted you to have an idea of what it'll look like on their contracts, the rate structure. So this is all the pre-ETS services, and we have the straight standardized $75 an hour for each service, and except for the work experience wages, which are the wages plus 25%. And for those transition and pre-ETS folks and RAMs and techs who were at the transition meetings, Alyssa was saying prevailing wages plus 25%, but we think it would be easier to just do the actual wages. So you can just ask them what they're making or see a pay stub or something like that to be able to verify what we're paying on instead of having to figure out prevailing wage. Then we did a standardized group structure. So you'll see as the number of students in the group increases, the amount that we pay per hour per student goes down. So the individual rate is $75 an hour, but if we have 4 students, then it'll be $25 per hour per student. If we have a couple more, it's a little less per student. Then the total payment to the provider increases as you get more students, because obviously it takes a little more work to have more students in the class. And this one's a little harder to read, but again, it's on the contract and you'll be able to see it in a different way. We'll have a desk aid, especially for techs who are doing the billing, but we also included a travel differential for the providers that wanted it, and a lot of them added it. So the first group rate is for 0 to 25 miles from the provider, and then we have travel differentials for 26 to 50, 51 to 75, 76 to 100, and 101 to 125, and you can see the rates go up accordingly because we can't charge travel. Intakes are not allowed for pre-ETS, so those aren't on contracts for pre-ETS. So we can authorize for the time spent for the first meeting at the hourly rate of services, like signing paperwork, and typical intake activities can happen at this first meeting. I'm going to fly through these because, again, it's just letting you know what we're telling the providers. But the reporting and invoicing process looks mostly the same for pre-ETS as it does for other services. No third-party assessment is allowed. That's something that we need to be sure is not included in the reports, or else it doesn't count for pre-ETS. It's good to add the student feedback and reflection or employer feedback or reflection. Reports should have the same format for both eligible and potentially eligible students. Invoices will be sent to the invoicing mailbox, and the reports is the same as the sample report, except for with the group rate, we're updating the sample report to have information. If it's a group service, they need to include the number of students who are potentially eligible, or pre-ETS students who attended the class. We talked about third-party assessments. Oh, this is all on another slide, so keep moving. The invoicing requirements, this is just what we always require for invoices, just being clear with community providers about that. Same thing here. And then just a few last things. So again, more information to come on a lot of things, but one thing that we have to do that RSA talked about is a higher level of contract management and managing for performance and accountability for the services that we purchase through PT contracts. So that's happening across the board, and we are going to be instituting those, of course, specifically for pre-ETS and benefits coaching. So know that that's coming, and we'll work with you on what that looks like. You might be wondering, oh, we've got these other grants that I've heard of. Well, how does that apply? We also grant money to the SILs for doing the career counseling information referral services for WIOA 511, and we weren't able to fit the round peg in the square hole in enough time to modify the way that we pay for this work. So those grants actually are continuing, and we're amending them to continue the work through year 4. We didn't want to disrupt that work. And then in year 5, it'll look different. We haven't figured out exactly what that will look like, but just know that those grants are out there and we are working to change them in the future. If you have questions or feedback, let us know. Here's a list of folks who are working on the various issues in here, and maybe some of the things that they're working on, so you know who to call. But always feel free to call any of us or all of us if you have feedback. And that is it. Again, this information we'll put on SharePoint, and more information to come. Really appreciate you all working through this with us, and you're doing great work, and we so appreciate you being flexible and adjusting to these changes that we've had to make. So have a great day.